For 50% of the population at least, Sunday night TV was never going to be the same again.
Fire!
With its daredevil hero, black-hearted villains and dramatic cliffhangers, Poldark became the Sunday night drug of choice for millions of addicts.
It was something you could treasure. It was like having a box of chocolates all to yourself, really.
It is a rip-roaring yarn, and with wonderful characters.
The story is the hook, and if you get a good story, then it works.
Lots of horses and carriages and beautiful girls and lusty blokes.
It's about love, it's about betrayal, the things that hurt us, the things that give us joy.
I was told that they had changed the church services on Sunday night in Cornwall because nobody turned up. They were watching Poldark.
But the differences between the original novels and the TV scripts caused nearly as much drama off-screen as on. Millions of women swooned over Captain Ross Poldark, the darkly brooding hero who rode about Cornwall righting wrongs and fighting against evil. Mr. Darcy, eat your heart out.
What time is it?
Past midnight.
Too early for sleep. I'll go and play the tables a while.
Ross Poldark was the quintessential romantic hero. He cut a very fine figure in his writing books, I remember particularly. He was slightly effeminate looking, I suppose, the longer hair, but nonetheless, he did it for a lot of young women at that time. I remember thinking I was probably the only person that fancied him. And then you suddenly realise it was like a secret society. Everybody fancied him.
Robin Ellis really got that part nailed beautifully, because it wasn't long before he was getting fan mail. People never quite knew what he was thinking, and that's always a catch.
Something wrong?
He's a bit of a rebel, a radical.
Courage!
He was an outsider to some degree, I think, and that's what was attractive about playing him.
What time is it?
10 o'clock. What's wrong with the bedroom?
The stairs.
He behaved very outrageously from time to time, and that was part of his charm, that somehow that he managed to able to get away with it.
Also perfectly capable of behaving outrageously was Demelza, Angharad Rees's sparky heroine.
God-fearing! Have you forgotten the 15 years you were falling down drunk?
When Ross and Demelza found each other, they became one of TV's great love stories.
You know, it's Heathcliff and Cathy. You think of those pairings, and Ross and Demelza were written like that.
Won't be forever. Nothing is forever.
That was the central romantic theme. All the rest was interesting, but you didn't really want to know whether a bank was going to foreclose more than you wanted to know whether Ross and Demelza were going to get it on.
As well as romance, Poldark also showed us the darker side of 18th century life.
God in heaven.
It wasn't lots of teacups and lifted fingers and all the sort of usual costume period drama niceties. It was quite rugged, and it was quite outside, and it was scruffy as well as beautiful. And I think that's what appealed to people.
And there was plenty of outside for the viewers to enjoy.
It's about a place. It's strongly about a people and a place. And in a way, the main character in the book is Cornwall.
The series was adapted from Winston Graham's Cornish novels and aimed to build on the success of two earlier BBC period dramas, the highly successful Forsyte saga in the 60s and the Aeneiden line in the early 70s. To turn the novels with their casts of thousands into gripping television, producer Maurice Barry first turned to the master adapter of the time, Jack Pullman, who had proved he could turn a period drama into a modern phenomenon with I, Claudius. But when author Winston Graham saw the first 4 scripts in which Ross gets together with Demelza, he was outraged at changes to Demelza's character.
It went to a sort of tribunal, and they argued, and I lost. And so it ended up the way Winston didn't like it.
Do you think one bottle'll be enough, sir, or shall I get you another?
I know he would like to have cancelled the thing, but he obviously couldn't. It had gone too far by then.
Fortunately for the viewers, it did go ahead, and the first series turned out to be a big success. A fabulous mix of tragedy, betrayal, romantic passion and suspense.
I think there was something in it for everybody. There was a bit of history, but it was a romp. Writers were told to work towards a cliffhanger. I mean, you don't have many cliffhangers in classical novels, but this had to be that at the end of the episode, an audience couldn't wait for the next.
Mercy me!
The first series got off to a cracking start as our hero came back from the war in America to find everyone, including his ex-girlfriend Elizabeth, thought he was dead.
It's perhaps foolish of me to imagine that everything would remain exactly as it was when I
Ross,
left.
I'm engaged to Frances. We're to be married at the end of the month.
His uncle was selling off the family tin mine, enough to make anyone head straight back to the colony. But Ross refused to let his inheritance go.
By heavens, it could work!
Of course it could, it will.
Robin Ellis made the role of the beleaguered hero his own, but he wasn't first choice for Ross.
We tried to find out if Lee Lawson was available. He was quite a big name then, and I'd written down Timothy Dalton, who of course went on to become James Bond.
I know we offered it to Ian McShane, who I knew from previous work. I'd done a film with him.
Eventually they decided to see a little-known actor who had appeared as an undercover cop in Fawlty Towers.
Having done 2 interviews, I knew that this was rather a good part and rather wanted to play it. And I had this agonizing wait to hear whether I got the part.
Oh, this came from the Bassets. They're happy to dine with us next week as invited.
The role was his, but every hero needs a woman to stand up to him.
I've forgotten about it. Well, they can't come now.
And none better than Demelza.
Because Prudy's ill.
She was a great match for him. That strength that she had and that determination and that kind of almost willfulness that she had was very, very attractive. And that's what made it, the series, so wonderful.
But Demelza seems a very unlikely heroine when Ross, still pining for Elizabeth, first meets her at a fair.
What's your name?
Demelza. Demelza.
But she scrubbed up rather well, and Ross couldn't help but notice.
Do you think I look pretty at all?
Yes, very pretty.
Prettier than some?
Prettier than most.
Not the prettiest though you've ever known, ever in your life before.
Well, obviously, she fell madly in love with Ross because he was dashing and handsome and just fell in love with him. But all the time, there was this thing in the background of him loving another woman. There were 3 people in that marriage, as they say. And I think that hurt her very much.
You said you loved me. Has that changed?
No.
Oh, give up this folly, Ross. For it is a folly, as mine was 4 years ago. This is now. Give it up, I beg you.
I suppose nowadays you term Elizabeth the Camilla, really, in the whole setup.
I was absolutely rooting for Demelza every step of the way. Elizabeth, to me, was a bit of a cold fish, and I could never really understand why Ross Poldark wanted her in his life.
Jill Townsend was surprisingly cast as the frosty upper-class Englishwoman that Ross couldn't get over.
The director had seen a review of a movie I had just completed, and the review was that I played the upper-class English girl to perfection. He thought, oh, that's what we need for Elizabeth.
Down here, there's so very little decent society. It's a wild country.
He was telling everybody why he chose them. And when he told me that, I said, isn't that funny since I'm American? And he freaked out. And he said, well, are we going to do accent coaching or whatever? I said, no, we can do it. It's all right.
Ross's cousin, Verity, was there to encourage him to get over Elizabeth.
You must forget her. You must put her aside. There's no road that leads to her anymore.
I was reading the paper, and it said that the BBC were going to do a series of Winston Graham's novels, Poldark, and I totally fell in love with the character of Verity. And I thought I would really like to play that. So I wrote personally to Maurice Barry, he was the producer, and I said, please see me for Verity. And he did, and I got the job. It was amazing.
Having put together a great cast, the producers made sure that the action came thick and fast.
Francis!
No!
Maurice Barry would look at my script and say, why does he just have to walk through the door? Why can't he kick the door down? Which meant that every few minutes something jolted an audience and it got them interested.
Ross, let me go.
Can you tell me what you mean? The very nature of that past.
I believe he suspects Valentine is not his child.
everything was heightened. Living at that time was very heightened. So it needed that. You couldn't stroll through Poldark.
The intensity was only added to by the battle between the brooding hero, Ross, and the smiling villain, George Warlegan, played by former Hammer horror star Ralph Bates.
Either you paid £600 for worthless shares, which is the act of a madman, or you withheld information to obtain the shares for yourself at less than their value, which is the act of a criminal. Which are you, Captain Poldark? A madman or a criminal?
I'm not on trial.
No, but you will be. I prefer the whole matter to the county court.
He was the dark side. You know, he absolutely passionately believed, as much as I passionately believed in what I believed in, and so the clash was for real.
How delightful.
There's a great temptation to we care, dear dad. You do your accent and, have a peasant there somewhere and everything's kind of over the top. And actually, I don't think Ralph Bates was over the top. He played it very straight. But, he was chilling, wasn't he?
Helping George was Ross's jealous cousin Francis, who managed to foul up Ross's life and his own.
I find it very hard to explain. Whatever I say will just sound like feeble excuses, but I know I haven't been the best of husbands. Well, perhaps I'll never make a good one, but I love you enough to try, if you'll let me.
He so managed to combine that sort of tragedy and romance and loss. I thought he was quite marvellous. Of course, originally he would love to have played Ross, but he loved to have played Poldark, but he was perfect in that part, which was such a vital part and a vital lynch in the whole drama of it.
And because Ross wasn't your typical goody two-shoes, we often saw him getting it wrong and putting himself in peril.
Run like the devil! Good luck!
I thought Robin captured the essence of that moral man who's battling with his own demons, he's battling with his own desires and his own passions. That's why it captures so many people's hearts.
And to balance the angst and betrayal, there was humour too.
Now, you brought me here to cuckold your husband, and cuckold him I will.
Captain!
For a show that was meant to be family viewing, Poldark had plenty of more adult moments.
When shall I see you again, Captain?
When the spirit moves me, Margaret.
An awful lot of that just went over children's heads as they watched it. They got the excitement of the fights and the riding out on the moors and so on, and the adults fully understood what was going on behind closed doors.
Why do they want to be left alone?
There was enough sauciness to interest an older audience, as it were, although Winston always objected to it being called a bodice ripper, I think. He didn't like that phrase. He thought that was rather common.
The combination of sex, suspense, romance and fantastic locations proved as popular as the BBC hoped, and Poldark ran for 29 episodes over 2 series, attracting audiences up to 12 million.
It had really captured people's imagination, and there was that feeling of, 7 o'clock on a Sunday evening when the Sunday series was on. The streets were empty. It was like, there was a big match on. Now.
You all right?
We all went to offices the next day and we all got on with our lives. But that Sunday night television serial lifted us out of all of that.
Even novelist Winston Graham came round to the charms of the show, and he became a regular visitor on the set, where one member of the cast in particular had become a hot celebrity.
Drake!
I went to see somebody in a play at the Aldwych, and there was a group of Irish schoolgirls who were over, and Poldark was very big in Ireland.
I'm aside.
The cash!
And I spent the second half of the play hiding in various parts of the building because they were pursuing me.
Robin and Angarad had become known as TV's sexiest couple, well beyond the confines of Cornwall.
We went to Madrid, and they'd announced it on television we were arriving, and we were completely mobbed as we got off the aeroplane.
There were 2,000 people to welcome us. And on the motorway we got waved at, It was kind of just an interesting moment to understand what it was like to being a Beatle for just a second.
Although Poldark was attracting a lot of fans, not everyone liked it.
I remember Clive James's review. I think I'm sort of rather proud of it now. He said, yes, and there's Poldark. which I notice is an anagram of old crap. I rest my case, he said.
In their desire to make the series as authentic as possible, the producers sometimes made life hard for themselves. Filming in a disused mine was a hazardous operation.
That's the tongue to the lower seam. Let's go and look at it.
It meant trekking down several flights of ladders, carrying lamps and cables and cameras and sound equipment and props and everything else.
Be careful as you come, this ladder's none too safe.
Yes, so I can see.
And then working down there, very wet, dripping water everywhere, slippery, and of course lit ostensibly by candles stuck on their hats with wax.
There's copper here somewhere. Question is how much? And how easy will it be to bring out?
Some of these mines had adits in them, and you'd be walking along in water, and if you didn't know, suddenly there wouldn't be any ground underneath you. There'd be a hole going straight down, goodness knows how many feet. Health and safety would have a nightmare today, I think. I don't think we'd have been allowed to do it today.
And using locally hired horses also made life tricky for the cast and crew.
I had all the hair and the curls and the this and the outfit, and I was to ride along the cliffs, and the horse was a bit skittish because it wasn't a picture horse. What they call a picture horse, used to being around cameras. So I said, well, let me just exercise it. And off we went at a gallop all along the cliffs of Cornwall, and of course the hair all came down, and I wasn't very popular by the time I got the horse back, but what a ride.
Horses are notorious for moving, quite naturally. So when they had these jolly scenes where one person rode up to another and they started a conversation, the horse would be constantly moving and the cameraman would be going crazy.
For the women who had to ride side saddle, it was even more terrifying.
I had a great fear of horses. I could just about rise to the trot, but that was a strider horse, and this, of course, was all side saddle. So they got me up on this horse, with amazing frock and the wig and the hat, and I was absolutely terrified. And I said to the groom, "What do I do if it rears up?" And he said, "This horse is so old, she would rather drop dead than rear up."
Getting the Cornish accent right wasn't easy either.
Good day, sir. This is Dr. Ennis. He's come directly from London.
I'd started the character, Dwight, with what I thought was quite a slight, nice Cornish accent. It wasn't overstated, but, it had a bit of a Cornish accent there.
Did I overhear you were from these parts? I was born and raised in Truro.
But one of the directors, Kenneth Ives, wasn't keen.
And he said to me, "Oh, Richard, what are you doing about that accent, by the way?"
You want a great deal.
What's wrong with that?
Sometimes people have to settle for less.
And I said, well, I don't know. I mean, I'm sort of doing a bit of Cornish. She said, "No, you're not. Drop it."
I tell myself I should stop. We should stop before it's too late.
I said, "Oh, no, I can't do that. I've already been on film. People will say, he's suddenly lost his accent. That's not Dwight anymore. He's suddenly gone English." He said, "No, they won't. Drop it." And I did. And I was very glad I did.
Keep a hold of what you have, Ross. Don't let go, whatever comes in the way. I did, and I will regret it all my life.
The crew employed Cornish villagers as extras, but they could prove unpredictable.
We did this whole thing when Robin had to go down and all the villagers went down to pillage the wreck.
They're told that there's a wreck on the high seas and they're supposed to fight the local police and get into the water and bring stuff back, and so they did.
They went tearing down into the sea and they started ripping everything apart and all of that, and suddenly they started to punch one another like crazy. And it was horrendous. There was blood and everything.
I heard one of the professional stuntmen say at one point, "Hold on, mate, it's only a play," because they were fighting as though it was for real.
we finished, and the chief stuntman came up and said, if that guy does that to me again, I'm going to kill him. He said, what are they doing? And we didn't discover until later that apparently they'd hired 2 villages of different people, and these villages had always had a tremendous feud. And so these villagers were actually taking it out on one another under cover of period costume and drama in the sea, and they were punching each other's lights out. And it was, and the women too, they really were going for it.
But the biggest problem to hit the show was another row over the adaptation, this time with the actors, about a scene between Ross and his doctor Dwight Ennis.
We decided that there was a scene which we had got, which we could really go to town on, and it would be much punchier and much stronger.
Oh, God, Ross. I felt that my dealing with Dr. Ennis was not right. It didn't feel right for my character. I played it for 6 episodes, and it just didn't feel right. And I went back to the book, and I discovered that Winston had written it as I thought it should be played.
In the book, there's a fight, there's a row between Ross and Dwight.
It was my fault.
I don't think so.
And so I rewrote the scene and presented it.
We all thought it was rather good, and it was met with absolute stony silence. No, sorry, you can't do that. You're contractually bound to do the script as per written, and we're not going to allow any script changes. So we got quite upset and quite heated about this, and it all got blown out of proportion.
You forget I am Cornish. I know our ways. We don't forgive easily.
It was as though I'd sort of altered the Genesis or something. It was, or a Shakespeare play, rewritten to be or not to be.
When I first heard those words, they sounded brave and admirable.
They were true. I meant every word of them.
Being sort of actors of principle and all of that, an opinion, we decided that we would sort of stick to our guns. Anyway, it got quite difficult.
Oh, God.
The producer took me out for a lunch at the canteen at the BBC and said, come on, Robin, it's only a play, and bought me 2 steaks, said, would you like another steak? And will you, give way and play the scene? And by that time, I felt fairly secure in the part that I wouldn't be dumped before the end of the series. And I said, no, I won't.
God, Ross, is it of no account to you what I feel?
Yes.
In the end, both sides compromised, but the row left Richard Morant, who played Dwight Ennis, disenchanted with the production. So when approached for the second series, he said no, and was replaced by Michael Cadman, giving the writers a bit of a problem to solve.
Not the same man who went away.
We couldn't believe it was in the script, but actually that's quite a clever way of covering it, so that everybody has a laugh and then they get on with the story.
Ross?
I must stop you.
Oh my God, Ross!
The second series was as raunchy and pacey as the first, dealing with the dramatic consequences of Ross finally having sex with Elizabeth. Never want to be outdone, Demelza strayed too. The second series also introduced some new star turns. Christopher Biggins appeared as the odious Reverend Osborne Whitworth.
You're a heavy man, Vicar. Heavy? Well set, perhaps. I do justice to my meals, but no one can accuse me of gluttony.
And Trudy Styler, sporting an enormous cleavage, played a good-time girl.
Do you know my name?
Emery, you said?
Guess along you lug my other name. It's True Girls.
With a hit on their hands, but having exhausted Winston Graham's stock of novels, the BBC sent scriptwriter Martin Worth to talk to the author about extending the life of the show.
Is that not extraordinary?
What?
He's the spitting image of Uncle Ross. Why have I not noticed it before?
Don't be so foolish.
Graham MacDonald, who I think was head of plays or head of drama or something, asked me, I haven't met him before, if I could persuade Winston Graham to allow the series to go on without the novels. In other words, we set up this series and he would be paid, but with his approval, we would devise the continuation of the series.
But Winston said no, and that, it seemed, was that. Poldark lovers everywhere were distraught, and the cast, presumably, were equally upset.
We didn't really want to do a third series. We'd done 29 episodes, 29 hours, and really the thrust of the thing had played out.
Where are we coming to now?
To a point, I think. We've just crossed the Tamar.
Oh. We had done sort of almost 3 years on the trot, and it was quite a heavy schedule. I think it was just to have a break.
How much longer is this going to go on for?
By the time Winston Graham started writing more Poldark novels, the BBC team had disbanded. But in 1995, HTV decided to adapt the first of these, The Stranger from the Sea. Robin Ellis and Ankara Dries agreed to reprise the roles that had made them famous. But negotiations between the stars and the company broke down, and shock horror, other actors were cast as Ross and Demelza.
They, I think, reneged on the gentleman's agreement about the money, and altogether it was a bit of a mess, and we didn't do it. But in the end, I think I'm happy that we didn't do it.
I think it's better to go now, for everybody's sake.
I mean, clearly it was a disappointment because, as I said, it would have been an interesting thing to do. But I think if you're going to do something like that, you have to do it full out and try and emulate the success of the first 2 series.
Robin and Ankara weren't the only ones who were upset. For the fiercely loyal fans, seeing their favourites replaced was a travesty. So much so that the Poldark Appreciation Society demonstrated outside HTV's headquarters.
We just want Robin and Ankara back.
They are Ross and Demelza, and it's as simple as that.
The Poldark Appreciation Society were not happy at all. They wanted everything to be the same as the first 2 series. But it wasn't going to be the same because it wasn't as good, the script wasn't as good, the budget was very low.
Winston Graham, though, liked the HTV version, which put him at odds with the Poldark Appreciation Society. The original Poldark TV series had inspired cult-like loyalty in its fans.
Like EastEnders, like The Archers, like any kind of soap, like any kind of creation where you've got people you know expressing their feelings and going through the emotions of love, life and death, then it evokes strong attachment, strong passion.
What would I do with a babe all alone?
You won't be alone. We'll be married.
And you love it. You love them. You love the people and you treasure them and you honour them and you respect them and you mustn't say anything bad about them.
When the video of the original Poldark series went on sale in 1993, it was the BBC's second highest seller. For the viewers and everyone involved, it was a wonderful experience.
It was a tremendously exciting project to work on, and it was a wonderful train set. I mean, horses and thousands of extras and fights and shipwrecks and all of that, and some terrific actors.
It sits in a little time capsule of its own as a very good example of what the BBC did on a Sunday night with good writing, good actors, a good script and some very good storylines.
I am leaving you, George. People are still buying it. So, a testament to Winston Graham and the characters who were in it.
I cherish it, basically. It's wonderful for an actor to have something that they've done in their career that has made some impact. You know, so I'm hugely appreciative of Poldark.
It was a very good piece of work. I enjoyed doing it, I enjoyed seeing it, I enjoyed being in it. It's a high point of TV drama.
The Concords are up next tonight on BBC4, and Brett's a little concerned about Jermaine's taste in women. And then Armstrong and Miller are back with their delightfully offbeat sketch comedy at 10:55.
Evil has a name. Dangalore. And when evil meets opportunity,
oh no, don't like it!
tyranny reigns.
Can I pull this off?
One man stands in his way.
My name's Crad Mandoon. I'll be your liberator this evening.
Unfortunately, his friends stand in his way.
Death to oppression! To oppression! No, that's the exact opposite of what I'm...
Crad Mandoon and the Flaming Sword of Fire, Thursday at 9 on BBC Two.
Showtime!
Armstrong and Miller are back with their own kooky brand of sketch comedy in half an hour here on BBC4.
But first, some strong language in brand new Flight of the Conchords. And it's not quite ladies' night at the disco.
Just here's good, Mary.
Yeah, just here.
We're a block away. I'll take you right to the door. Don't be silly.
Just here.
I don't even want to go night clubbing.
You've got to go night clubbing, Brett. Look at Jermaine. He wants to night club.